What's up, everybody? It's Guubums back with another video. As promised, I am making an openers video. It is coming a little bit late, but it's still coming. This is going to be a really important video. I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of players because oftentimes when I talk about like the best comps to play in a certain patch, a lot of people ask me, okay, what are the best openers I can use to kind of like get into these lines? And today we're going to be talking about them. And the thing with openers is that like if you guys understand like fundamental opening theory in terms of like what makes a strong opener versus like what makes a bad opener. This video is going to be pretty helpful for you. I might sometime down the line make like kind of like a more fundamental video about like talking about like what actually makes a strong opener. But for the most part, you're just really looking to win streak because win streak is generally stronger than loss streak. So generally, most of these kind of like openers that I'm giving you are going to be tailored to that win streak, with the exception of the one on your screen, which is obviously cypher. It's a little bit niche, but also the other thing to think about with openers is that like how does your opener get you into the line that you want to play? So very first and foremost, I'm going to go through cypher. Cypher is kind of like the most wide opener, meaning that you can play whatever you want. Generally speaking, you are going to have priority over most other players in the lobby when you're playing cypher, because when you're playing cypher, you're going to be a little bit lower on HP. You're playing obviously a lost streak strategy. Generally speaking, you're going to be higher econ, not just because cypher tends to give you some econ resources, but also just because when you're open forting, you generally make more econ breakpoints than the other players in the game. You're obviously on a streak, which does generate you some econ. You're not going to be quite as rich as like a full win streaker, but you are just generally going to be one of the wealthier players in the lobby. So some tips about Cypher is that generally speaking, you shouldn't actually be holding LeBlanc out of your stage 1 boxes. And the reason for that is that at level 3, which is going to be all the way up until the earliest 2-2, you're not going to actually have access to any 3 costs. And what I mean by that is that if you get LeBlanc out of a box, that means you probably didn't get Draven or Galio out of a box. Now, I'll talk about Draven and Galio out of a box in just a second, but if you get LeBlanc out of a box, you actually have to wait a couple turns before you can get Cypher. Now, that being said, if you get LeBlanc out of a box, it is sometimes fine to hold it. In the case that like all your other options kind of like don't make sense, so you don't have any upgrades, so your augment is not really a tempo augment. And what I mean by a tempo augment is like an augment that kind of gives you immediate power, right? So say you take the simplest example, something like Raining Gold. It's an econ augment that you're kind of like storing the power of that augment for later into the game when you actually start spending your econ. But giving you Raining Gold immediately is not going to be too powerful because you're not actually spending that gold immediately, right? So in the case of like you get an econ augment, maybe you have a LeBlanc and you want to like open for it and try to look for Cypher later down the line, it's still a viable strategy. But for the most part, I wouldn't be too pressed about holding LeBlanc early on in my stage 1 kind of like opener. And I will talk about holding LeBlanc up until 2-4, which is the carousel after 3 rounds. And off the carousel, generally speaking, if you're holding LeBlanc, you should be loose streaking, so you should have priority on the carousel to kind of like look for either the item you want, or sometimes you're looking for Draven Galio, right? And obviously, once you have Draven Galio, assuming you have a Vi, then you're gonna have Cypher. And if you have 3 Cypher on 2-5, then most of the time you can get it, make it to Wolves with one of the kind of like desirable cash outs. I'll talk about the cash outs in just a second. Again, this is going to be an openers video, but I think it's like a little bit tough to talk about openers without talking about Cypher. So I do think it is notable to talk about some of the Cypher cash outs. My last tip about Cypher, real quick, is that you can actually just trap your melee unit in the right most hand corner, and this like kind of like guarantees, quote unquote, that you lose your streak. If you guys watch streamers, if you watch me, other pro players, you guys will see that like a lot of pro players like kind of default to something like this, just because like yes, they could kill like a unit or 2 more if they were like to position like normally. However, the risk of winning a fight with Cypher is just not worth killing those 1 or 2 units. Now, if you've guaranteed that no one in your lobby will be losing to you and you can win every fight, then it's perfectly acceptable to position like this. But I've noticed that in lower level lobbies, people don't actually position against this trapping setup very well. So that most of the times, if you trap like this, then you're like almost guaranteed to lose the fight. Obviously, your Galio is going to come in at the end of the fight when your carries are already dead, so it's like functionally a non-unit. And then this way, you can kind of like guarantee your loss streak. So when you get to 2-5 Cypher, and what that 2-5 Cypher really means is like, again, most of the time you're just getting it off the carousel. Even if you have 3 Cypher, you can kind of reach the more desirable cash outs by 3-7, which is Wolves, which is generally speaking when you should be looking to cash out. The best cash out in the game right now, the most consistent one, is this 290 cash out. And the reason for that is because you have a 50% chance at a Radiant item. Radiant item is going to be like, I don't know why, but like every cash out that has a radiant item kind of like just in general is better than every other cash out. I think they just haven't properly balanced the outputs of the cash outs yet. And this Masterwork upgrade at 290 is a completely ridiculous cash out. You're getting a full prismatic functionally for like what is like essentially 40-50 HP. But the thing is, like, if your prismatic gave you 40-50 HP, you would never take it, right? Because there's a silver in the game that gives you 25 HP, and a prismatic is definitely worth 2 times more than a silver. But this prismatic is like an obscene amount of board power. You get to choose the radiant that you want, generally speaking, your main carry. So in the case of you're playing a Rageblade build, most of the time it's going to be a Rageblade. You're saying it's like a blue buff build, most of the time it's going to be a blue buff. You're playing like a Shojin JG build, most of the time it's going to be Jewel Gauntlet. The thing is, like, this thing is so flexible and you're guaranteed to get something that you want, that this is absurdly broken. This other radiant, it's slightly less broken, obviously, because it's less consistent, but it is, you get a full extra item when you get this over this, if you think about it, right? Because Masterwork transforms an existing item into a radiant, whereas this one just gives you a radiant. So the difference between these two is like the existing item that you already had. Obviously, this is not that consistent because oftentimes you're getting a radiant that is not the exact radiant that you want. But the thing is, like, the power of a radiant is so high that once you get to this cash out, most of the time you're off to the races anyway. Now, that being said, there's a 25% chance at being a mid cash out, which is this duplicator with essentially a lot of gold. You can just think about this as like 50 gold, 60 gold, something along those lines, just because this duplicator is going to be worth a lot. If you duplicator your carry immediately on 4-2, say you're like going level 8 and rolling down, then that duplicator can be worth upwards of like 20 gold. And oftentimes you'll probably be able to get a streak out of it. So yeah, this duplicator can be very, very powerful. Now, finally, this 25% cash out at this artifact item is terrible. And by terrible, I really do mean terrible, because you're offered this artifact item and you do have knowledge of what it is, which is different from the radiant item. So you can choose to skip it, which writers have expressed that like that's kind of like the vision of this cash out, is that like you see an artifact, you want it and you take it, versus you see an artifact, you don't want it and you can actually push for more cypher cash outs. However, practically speaking, like, if you're playing Cypher all the way until 3-7, you're going to be relatively low on HP. Obviously going to be high on gold, but you can't exactly be picky about your cash out, because at the end of the day, you're low on HP. You can't really sack anymore, and it's really tough to play Cypher on your board and not lose HP on stage 4, right? So in the case that you get this, oftentimes you are going to be very, very sad. But for the most part, this 290 cash out is going to be the one that you're targeting. Now, if you look at this 330 cash out, for example, the Steve Gloves one is good. This 25% one is okay. Generally speaking, none of these are going to be that valuable. It's just going to be like 32 gold flat, which again is not bad. But as I kind of like referenced with this 25% at this duplicator, this ends up probably being more gold for you than this 25% cash out. And this 25% cash out with 4 components and a reforger is quite fantastic. Like 2 full items, generally speaking, that you get to choose, because I believe these come... Oh, these do not come in anvils, so these are 4 random items. This is quite good, but again, not quite as good as some of these item cash outs on 290. And finally, this techie cash out is completely terrible. Generally speaking, if you guys have watched pros play Cypher, if they hit this point, then they're generally just calling that they lost the game, because this cash out is really that bad. And until you get to 370, which has like most good cash outs, you really want to avoid 330, which is why I kind of like drew emphasis to this 290, is that it's significantly more powerful than 250, bar some specific circumstances, and it's really more powerful than this 330, which you don't really want to overshoot, right? So you really want to look for this 290 when you're playing Cypher. Generally speaking, cashing out at Wolves. All right, enough about Cypher, because that's probably not really why you clicked on this video. But that being said, I do think it is worth giving you guys some tips about Cypher, just because it is by far the strongest opener in the game. But again, that's probably not why you clicked on this video. So the actual best opener in the game is going to be Morgana, Alistar, and Bruisers. I'll talk about Gragas just a little bit later, but generally speaking, your kind of like setup for this opener is going to be Morgana, Alistar 2. And the thing is, you don't particularly need Morgana 2, but Alistar 2 is like far and away the strongest upgraded unit in the game right now on stage 2. And the thing is, they actually buffed all 3 of these units in the previous patch, which is a little bit strange, because I think in the previous patch, these guys were already the strongest opener. Riot didn't really give a great explanation as to why they buffed these units, but if you guys were familiar at all with the Chinese strategy, where they actually just took Morgana Gragas opener, again, I'll talk about Gragas just a little bit later, but they took Morgana Gragas Alistar into a fast 9, and they would play Aurora, keep Gragas Morgana on their board, play it around either Viego Mordekaiser for Techie Bruiser, or they play like Kobuko and like a cyber boss somehow. Now, obviously they buff Kobuko, and they nerf Viego and Aurora, so like that strategy is a little bit awkward. But that being said, like fast lining in general is like a little bit tough to begin with. So like if you're able to do it, it just means you're high rolling like throughout the game, not just on your opener. So I won't talk about fast line too much. But regardless, this is going to be the best opener in the game. If you get Alistair 2 and Morgana 2, if you guys followed any of the 4v4 scrims kind of going on this past weekend in NA, you'll notice that anytime anyone has a Morgana, Alistair, or Mundo, they'll calm that to their teammates just because we know it's like far and away the best opener in the game, right? So if I have Morgana 2, Alistair 2, Mundo 2, any of like, 2 out of 3 upgraded, then I'm going to tell my teammates I have those 2 out of 3 upgraded because they know that as soon as I calm that I'm going to be the win streaker of the team. And what I mean by that is that this board is legitimately unbeatable on stage 2 if you have proper slammable items. And like I'm not exaggerating. It's genuinely unbeatable. Like you're only getting beat by like like maybe Twisted Fate 2 with the Rage Blade already with 3 Syndicate in. Probably need an Alistair 2 of their own to pair with their Darius 1. Most of the time, you're not really getting Twisted Fate 2 and Darius 2 on stage 2, right? So, like, you need Alistair 2. Alistair 2 is better than Darius 2 in most scenarios on stage 2. So, again, it doesn't really make sense why Riot buffed this. All you guys need to know is that they did, and all you guys need to know is that you guys should be using this to kind of get into whatever line you want. And talking about lines is that like this comp is insane for getting you into the best lines in the game. So the 2 best comps in the game right now are without a doubt Street Demon Vertical, 7 Street Demon, and Vexotech. So I talked about these 2 comps in my previous video. If you guys haven't watched that, feel free to check it out. But the best comps in the game by far are going to be those 2 comps. So how does this like opener get us there, right? Well, for Vex, first and foremost, it's actually really quite easy because Morgana goes on your endgame board, and your endgame board also plays 2 bruisers most of the time with Mordekaiser and Gragas. And if you get Gragas out of an orb, as previously mentioned, like you can that's obviously the favorable option over one of like whichever unupgraded version of Alistair Mundo you have, because it gives you 2 Divinicore and Gragas gives you a ton of HP on your board, right? If you happen to hit Mordekaiser and say, regardless of whether you have Gragas or not, it's like perfectly acceptable to play 3 Bruiser in the early game. I think this is like something that a lot of like lower level players or like lesser experienced players like kind of don't really understand, is that like you don't actually just have to look at your synergy bar to kind of like construct your board, especially in the early game. Because say I have a Morgana 2, an Alistair 2, and a Mundo 2, and I can play, say, Vayne for Slayers. It's like, what value does Vayne actually give me on my board? Morgana is my main damage threat. Mundo getting Slayers just kind of increases his damage. Again, not that valuable. And Vayne is a damage threat, right? I should be trying to empower my Morgana rather than empower my Mundo, right? And by doing that, I could like think about adding something like a Ross, like Ross doesn't really draw the point home because I get another synergy, but just like another synergyless unit, say like an Alistair 2, is literally the best thing I can play, bar like the special ones like just like Gragas and Elise and obviously Jhin. But you don't actually need to always add a synergy to make your board stronger, and that's like a concept that you guys really need to grasp to kind of like help the fundamentals of your opening of the game, right? So yeah, if you get in Mordekaiser, if you get Gragas, obviously you're just gonna throw these in, and this will like get you very easily into the Exotech line. As for how you get into the AP line with this, the Street Demon line with this, rather, it's just like Morgana's building AP items. You have a Mundo. It's not that uncommon that like, say I don't have Alistair this game. I play 3 Street Demon in the mid game. Like say I hit a Echo Zyra, right? Like this is my level 5, I have Street Demon, my Morgana is still going to be the better carry over my Zyra, and it is going to hold all my AP items. Let's say I hit a Morello, maybe a JG after like Krugs, like you're off to the races with this. Like it's very easy to play Street Demon from this spot, right? You'll just hold every Street Demon, you'll add them in as it makes sense. Obviously, you should still play strongest board, so in the case you have an Elise, most of the time if you're win streaking, which you will be, you should be playing Elise. So like you're still good to go, and then you just maybe hold Zyra on bench or something like that, add a 3rd Bruiser, as previously discussed, and again, you're off to the races. Now, as for getting into Vexotech, it's the same idea, right? You do have to build slightly different items, like you are going to be looking for Blue Buff Gunblade in that case, but obviously this is going to be best in slot Morgana, right? Not that best in slot Morgana particularly matters, but like when these items are best in slot Morgana, and as well as are best in slot for your late game carry, which is going to be Vex, obviously, again, you're off to the races, right? It's really easy to kind of like transition this early game into the Vex mid and late game, just because you're playing Morgana and Gragas in your mid game board. In the case that you hit a Jhin and say sometimes like you hit a Mordekaiser, then like eventually it's like pretty easy to fit in 3 exotech. It doesn't actually really matter which one you put in. Like say you just put in a random Varus. It doesn't give an extra synergy, but like it gives you an exotech item, which generally pumps the power of your early game even, or sorry, your mid game even more. And again, you're off to the races playing Vex. So again, look out for this opener, Alistar, Mundo, and Morgana. But don't be too focused on like hitting this exact 3 units. So I talked about all these other units you can play, which is like Gragas, Mordekaiser. Those are like 3 costs, so it's like a little bit more niche. But don't be afraid to like kind of mix and matches, right? So the reason why I brought these 3 up without actually having a synergy between them is because Alistar and Mundo are going to be the strongest frontline in the game regardless of your backline. It straight up does not matter. We'll kind of like revisit this frontline some more, but the same is true for Morgana for backliners. So like say in the case that I have Poppy 2 and Jax 2, yes, I don't have like the best frontliners in the game, but I do actually have the best backliner in the early game, right? So it's still fine to do the same ideas I mentioned previously, and you slowly transition to the comp that you actually want to play. In this case, it would be Vex because of my items, but in the case I have maybe Shojin, Jewel Gauntlet, then it's still going to be like Brand, and you can slowly kind of like build up your street demons that way. Morgana 2 is still the best backline in the game, even without Dynamo, but obviously as you get Dynamo, so you high roll an Elise, there's like almost nothing that beats Morgana, Elise, Gragas +1. Like if you have an upgraded Mundo or Alistar, there will be nothing that beats you on stage 2. It's just not possible. And yeah, you just be able to transition into the actual board you want to play. Now, let's talk about other openers that are significantly worse, but still quite good. The first one's going to be Street Demon. This one's like very easy to kind of like throw into the video, again, just because the strongest comp in the game is Street Demon. So it's like very hard not to talk about this comp, right? Or this opener, rather. And that's just like Zyra, Mundo. Again, you're seeing Zyra, Mundo, Alistar. Maybe we didn't have Morgana this game, so we have to play Zyra. Damn, that sucks, But it doesn't really suck because we get to have Street Demon early and we get to build up our units for playing around Brand in the late game, right? So, like, again, Zyra, Dr. Mundo, Echo, I'll talk about Jinx in a second, but these units are going to be on your late game board. So it is quite valuable to have them all 2-starred in the early game. It provides you decent board strength as well. Obviously, again, Mundo and Alistar are being played, so you're already like pretty happy. But yeah, this is going to be like a very easy opener to get you into the Street Demons. Like almost doesn't really require too much discussion. Like very straightforward stuff if you guys have ever played TFT before. Now, the one thing I will talk about is that Jinx, especially with a mana item, but even without a mana item, out of a box is very, very impactful. So if you have a Jinx out of like your stage 1 box is the same thing I talked about earlier here with like Draven and Galio out of box, or like in the case of the Bruiser Morgana setup, like Gragas out of a box. Getting a Jinx out of a box is also very, very valuable. You do need some upgraded frontliner, most likely in the form of Mundo 2, but Jinx as an early game item holder for your brand is almost certainly going to be stronger than Zyra. Even in the case that you have like Shojin, Jewel Gauntlet, these items are better on a Jinx one than they are on a Zyra 2. And that's just something you have to know. It's not like something I can like prove to you, but at the end of the day, like Jinx is like probably slightly stronger on average for a 3-cost unit. And Zyra, despite the buffs, is probably slightly weaker than your average upgraded backliner for 1 cost. So Jinx is just going to be stronger, especially if you have a mana item. Like Jinx best in slot, assuming you're to carry her ever, is something in the lines of like Shojin plus 2 damage items, like say GS, it's probably like GS IE. But like, again, we can build Shojin GS on Jinx and then still put it on brand later, right? Like we can build Shojin Morello on Jinx and be fine, right? Like, doesn't Jinx spread Morello just as good as Zyra? Yes, absolutely, right? So it's like perfectly fine to put these items on Jinx and move them later. Say Guardbreaker. The one like kind of like if you want is Jewel Gauntlet. It's like maybe in this scenario, so you have like Techie in, say like this Alistar's Mordekaiser, then it makes sense to probably move some of these items onto or keep some of these items on Zyra instead, right? But with pretty much every other combination of items, with the exception of Jewel Gauntlet and maybe Deathcap specifically, Jinx is just going to hold them better than Zyra. This is important for playing around Street Demons in the early to mid game, because this is like something I notice a lot of players doing incorrectly. Sometimes you don't even have to build JG as your first, like, say, glove or damage item, right? Like, oftentimes it's going to be GS, oftentimes it's going to be Guardbreaker, right? And all these items are functionally hybrid items, so it doesn't actually matter if you put it on an AD unit versus an AP unit, and Jinx is just better than Zyra. A lot of times you'll, like, say, like, you drop Zyra altogether, you can hold it on your bench because you'll need some late game, but, like, you just play 2 Marksman, and Jinx 1 is going to be, like, a fairly decent carry for all of stage 2. As you get to stage 3, she is going to struggle, but it's like, as you get to stage 3, Zyra's going to struggle as well, right? So, like, nothing's changing there. If you happen to have a Jinx 2, you'll be stable all of stage 3, guaranteed, assuming you have any front line at all. And even on stage 4, say you don't hit like brand 2 right away. So even if you don't hit brand 1 right away, or like a Ziggs 2, Ziggs 1, it's perfectly acceptable to carry Jinx 2 on stage 4 for a little bit. Again, perfectly acceptable. Again, you have to like talk, we're talking about like the margins here, right? It's perfectly acceptable, yes, but you do really want that Brandon Ziggs. But again, pretty much all I'm trying to say here with this segment is to say that Jinx is a fantastic unit, both in the early, mid, and late game. So it's perfectly acceptable to put items on her, and it's better to put items on her over Zyra. So again, very straightforward opener, very straightforward like line selection here. Like it's very obvious what I want to play when I open something like this. And yeah, it's the best comp in the game, and yeah. Next up, we have the only AD opener in the game, or I guess like the best Rageblade opener in the game, which is Kog'Maw 2 and some sort of like frontline, doesn't really matter. Again, Mundo Alistar is going to be the best, but with this one specifically, because Vi is the only one-cost frontliner that comes close to the power of the Bruisers, Vi 2. The problem is, Sylas is terrible, and Sylas is one of your most accessible early game vanguards, right? So like obviously you want to pair your Vi opener with like another upgrade, or say like in the case that you have Sylas 2, you want to pair it with another vanguard. The problem is Sylas sucks. But the other kind of like benefit we have is that like the 2 costs are quite good. So Rost and Skarner have a lot of value. Rost especially is quite good, just like as a unit, especially even with like without upgrades on stage 2. It's really quite tanky. Obviously gives you Divinity Core as well, and pairs well with Vi, pairs well with like say Morgana in some cases. And the benefit you have for this opener over the Bruisers is that like your 2 costs are actually valuable. So notice how when I was talking about the Bruisers, I never once made mention of Darius. Oh, I think I mentioned Darius only to say he sucks, and that's because Darius sucks. This comp, the 2 costs are actually really quite good. So in the case that you have like a Skarner 2 and a Ross 2, you're actually happy. If you have a Darius 2 while playing Bruisers, are you even happy? No, because he sucks. Especially Ross 2, you're definitely going to be able to streak with this comp. And most of the time, like if you have an AD opener, you don't definitely want to streak, because AD openers in general, this is historically true for a lot of TFT, is that like AD openers just tend to be really strong because they build a lot of Rageblade, and Rageblade is a fantastic early game item, right? Obviously fights are longer in the early game because people have less damage, and Rageblade happens to be able to stack up all the way to max, and your Kog'Maw is just going to do a bunch of damage. And also Kog'Maw is just a fantastic unit, honestly. You don't need Kindred, it can be Draven. Even Twisted Fate, they're all fine. All the rapid fire pairings with Kog'Maw are really quite strong. So it doesn't actually matter which one you get. Obviously, Draven's gonna be the best, but like the case, quote unquote, for playing Kindred is that she's also a marksman. So if you happen to hit a Jinx, then again, like you're playing like a pretty solid backline, and then it's like really easy to get into like say Vanguard, Marksman, Aphelios, which again is one of the better comps in the game. It's not quite as good as Vex and Brand main lines, but it is very, very strong. The other thing is that like you can get into the other Rageblade comps, which is Vayne and Twisted Fate. As previously mentioned in my previous video, Twisted Fate is the significantly stronger comp over the Vayne right now. But again, if you have a Rageblade, you're going to be looking for one of these comps anyway. And this is the best Rageblade opener that doesn't really need 2 costs. Because again, yes, although we are looking for Skarner and Rost, Sylas is perfectly acceptable. Like you probably won't win 5 with this setup, but you know, like as you progress through stage 2, like obviously say this is your opener, as you progress through stage 2, you're going to be able to like make adjustments or kind of like add things to this setup that will make you stronger. Like you will be able to access Skarner, and even in the case like say you just get Fiddle, again Boombot is like a really strong early game trait. So like even though Fiddle's not the best unit to put in this comp, because Kog'Maw is quite good and Boombot is quite a good trait, it's like pretty fine to put this as your early game board. Fiddle also offers a little bit of magic shred, so your Boombot damage is going to scaled a little bit. So yeah, this is like pretty standard stuff. This is like your standard Vanguard AD opener. Again, not the best because it's just not Cypher and it's not Morgana Bruisers, but it is still pretty good, and it's going to be better than most other things. Notice how I'm not talking about Bastions. That's because both of these units suck. Poppy and Jax are both very quite bad. The option to playing around Poppy and Jax are like more specific. Like Jax has Exotech, and if your early game Exotech item is strong, say it's like Lantern or Chassis, sometimes like you're playing around like two item Jin with the Exotech item. Like Pulse is also really quite strong. Hollow Bow is really mid. Flux is really mid. If you get like Pulse and like Rage by Jin, you can like still get into AD pretty easily. But like these openers are more like specific. than these other openers I'm talking about, because like you can really kind of pair back frontline vanguards with anything. You can pair frontline bruisers with anything. You can pair Kog'Maw Kindred with any frontline, and you can pair Morgana with any frontline, right? Versus like these ones, like you just need specific setups for them to be good. Obviously, you'll still upgrade them. You'll still play them if you have them upgraded, because like that's just probably still your best bet to play upgraded units. But for them to like truly excel, it's like pretty specific. Like Poppy needs Veigar, or I guess like they need each other. Like Poppy needs Veigar, Veigar needs Poppy to really do anything. And then like Veigar's really quite a good item holder for a lot of AP lines, especially like if you get the like blue buff combo, you can play Vex, or you just play Veigar comp. Both are like pretty acceptable. But again, Veigar's like a 2 cost, right? And like getting an upgraded Veigar in the early game is really quite difficult. Whereas like getting an upgrade Kog'Maw, upgraded Morgana, upgraded Kindred, like none of these are all that difficult. And yeah, like I didn't want to talk about this too much, but I guess I brought it up, so it's worth talking about. These openers, like these units are just like worse on average. Sometimes you have to pick them up and play around them. Most of the time, you don't. So the thing is, like last thing about I guess Bastions is that Alawi's quite good, but like Anima's pretty weak right now, so it just doesn't end up mattering that much. Shyvana sucks, so like I don't know. There's not too much to talk about with this anyway. And if you have like a Galio, then you'd much rather look for Cypher rather than to play for board, right? So yeah. Finally, we have Nitro. I put this opener in the game just because I do think it's like slightly underrated, but and I don't think like it's that obvious how to play it right now. Like I see a lot of people play Nitro and they just kind of like do random stuff, like they'll reroll Neferi or like reroll Jin, and like sometimes like their exotech item sucks, so like it doesn't really make sense to reroll them. I see people like get too attached to it, like they're not willing to get out of Nitro. I just want to talk about like this opener just because it's probably like a very popular opener amongst lower elo players, just because it's just like something that you guys are probably familiar with in previous batches being very, very strong, as well as something that's really, really simple, right? Like you get it in the opener and you never get off of it for the rest of the game. Now, I want to talk about like how you get off of it, when you get off of it, versus like when you stay on it. So I'd say the only time you stay on it really is when you're playing reroll, say like Neferi Jin, something along those lines. That's one reason to stay on it. I think that's fine. That being said, I do think Neferi reroll is pretty specific to your exotech item, just because like say in the case that you get Neferi reroll, but you're playing around an exotech item with like Repulsar Lantern, that doesn't really benefit your Neferi all that much, right? So it might benefit your Mordekaiser or Sejuani, and maybe even your Jax, if like depending on which one you play. But at the end of the day, if you're 3-starring your Neferi and your Jin, then you're not really looking for an item that benefits a 2-star Mord, a 1-star Sejuani most of the time, or like a like a 2-star Jax. Like none of those actually matter, right? So now that that's out of the way, like how do you actually play Nitro into the mid game and late game? So in the mid game, it's like perfectly fine to hold this all the way until stage 4. Like it's a perfectly strong opener. 3 Nitro is really still quite a strong opener despite nerfs to it. But if you're not like re-rolling, most of the time you are just gonna get off of it at some point in the game. But the case for not getting off it is to play around like Annie and Yumi, just like AMP in general, and then hopefully you hit a Samira. Like the standard AMP board doesn't actually play Nitro; it plays this setup. But the thing is, like if you have Nitro in the mid game, it's like perfectly acceptable to like not swap into this right away, because like this only really gains its power once you have Samira and you get 3 Street Demon as well. Like when you have Echo, Nico, and like say like this is just a random third, I don't know, like Jinx or something, it's like not all that relevant, right? However, if you have Nitro from the mid game, it's like perfectly fine. Like let's just put Elise because Elise is gonna be better than Kindred. It's perfectly fine to play a setup like this into the mid game and then just like stack around Annie or Yumi. Like you generally want a blue buff, Shojin or something like that. Sometimes you want them on the same unit, and then this is like how you kind of play Nitro into the late game. But I'd say most of the time you are still gonna get rid of it and just play your main comp. Like a lot of people play Nitro into Jin in the mid game, like say with the Rage Blade, and then they just play like Aphelios because Zeri's a little bit underpowered right now, right? So again, there's not like too much I want to say about this Nitro setup. It's just like I see a lot of people kind of like making mistakes with this, so I figured I'd mention it. And I also do think AMPs are really quite strong, but it's not exactly easy to explain the situations where you want to like be able to get in this comp, because this comp is pretty reliant on hitting Samira for your 5 AMP. Like right, I'm assuming you have Neferi too, but this comp is pretty reliant on hitting Samira at some point. So because she's a 5 cost and you can't guarantee access to this unit, it's just better to like not talk about this comp too much, but there are cases where you know, say you have like a Yumi 2 in the mid game, you open with the Neferi and like Nidalee, and you're just playing Nitro, and you just kind of like scale with this comp, and you're healthy, so you can get to 8, sometimes get to 9, and you know, you'll get any 2, and eventually get Samira, and you're off to the races, right? AMP is quite a powerful comp, again, just gated by Samira. And yeah, that's the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys did, obviously, would really appreciate a subscription and a comment and a like and all that fun stuff. You guys have heard it all before. Leave feedback in the comments on what you guys want to see, and if you guys want to see more of me, obviously all my socials will be down in the description below. And yeah, until next time, I'm out. Peace.